go right into our announcements. Let's get that mouse off the screen too. Wow, that's annoying. All right, make sure to sign in. If you want pizza, you want voting rights, you want to be a member of the club, this is true. You need to sign in at signin.ritsec.club. Please make sure you do that every meeting. We appreciate it. Uh, Join the Discord. If you're not in the Discord, you're missing out. This is where we announce a lot of stuff. This is where all the interest groups talk, chat. Everyone chats. We have a very good memes channel, and we also post news and stuff. So please join the Discord if you haven't already. That is discord.retsec.club. We have a calendar. Here you can see all of our events, what's happening, what's coming up, when the interest groups meet, stuff like that. So that's calendar.retsec.club. Make sure to check that out. We have a mailing list if you want to get our nice thing every week that tells you what the topic of the week is, what the research presentations, any upcoming events. You will get a nice email about that. So make sure to sign up for the mailing list if you want to keep up to date. Last day for swag, last call. If you have swag that you have not picked up yet, today is your last day. After this, yeah, good luck. Make sure you bring proof that you actually got the swag. This does not apply to, does this apply to IRSec that just happened? No, so you should have got your t-shirt, but anything other than IRSec 2021, make sure you pick up your swag. Today's the last day. Yes. When will we be getting more swag? Soon. We are working on general swag. This is more for competition stuff. So like if you did a competition last year online, there will be more RT6 swag. Pay attention to Discord. We will be posting updates about that soon. There are no people in the club. Are there? I don't know. We have, Enzo's going to talk about this one actually. Oh my God, it's stuck. There you go.
Alrighty, so we just want to put this out. We created a feedback form for ITSec since, we're not perfect and we all make mistakes. So I just want to put this out there, and if you have any sort of things you want us to improve on or things that we've done wrong or anything, head to that feedback form. We will take it very seriously. We are trying to improve. Like I always say in my intro slides, that we're always learning, and that doesn't just apply to technical knowledge. It applies to, running things and other logistics. So please, if you have feedback, let us know how we're doing. It could be about literally anything RTSec related. So please, thank you very much.
Thank you, Enzo. I think that is it for our announcements. So clap it up for our sponsors. Yeah, them too. They're also good. All right. We have social media. You can check out our social media if you want to. Here are the handles. You could probably just also look up RITSec and they'll come up. And I think that's it for today. And I'll be handing it off to Tenchi for core services. Clap it up.
Okay, so I think we're gonna go like this. All right, hello everyone. My name is Tenchi, and I'll be presenting on core services. So a little bit about core services. Hello? Oh, I had to put it this way. So hello again. For those who don't know me, my name is Tenchi. I'm a third year. Yada yada yada. Head of research. Okay. So core services is something that's really separate from the base operating system that you get. So nothing that's on by default. So we're going to talk about core services in terms of how it's additional services that are on the operating system and competitions and CTFs and whatnot. Okay, so a quick recap. Yeah, we talked about Linux, a lot of Linux stuff, Windows, networking. Got a co-op? Please let us know. Unless. Okay, so what is a service? So a service that, in terms of Linux, is when we refer to services, daemons. We're talking about a process maybe that's running. So it's independent of a logon. Often listens to a port like TCP, Not always. In Windows, it's very similar to Linux in that it runs in the background, and it's a little different in how accounts utilize services, and I'm going to go into that more in depth. It can only usually be a single instance of a service, so you can't have two FTP instances on your two FTP services running at the same time. So you can have like VSFTP or SFFTP in the same box. So things like that. Okay, so how Linux does the daemon, okay? So in Linux, we call services by daemons, okay? Not to be confused with services. Linux has both. It's a little different, okay? But so in Linux, services are controlled by what is known as systemd, and you're going to use systemctl to kind of manage and control those services. There's a couple of other tools in systemd that allow you to monitor and kind of look at services more in depth. Oh, that kind of spiked a little bit. But yeah. Yes, some people really do not like systemd. I read up on that GNOME has a lot of dependencies for systemd, and it's very terrible. People, do you want to talk more about that? Okay, so the init process, right? So systemd is going to initialize the service, and the first process started on system boot. Okay, this is just kind of the talking about the initial process of how the Linux system boots. But all other processes are going to be PID 1 and greater than. Um, Typically, systemd, unless you're on some alternate, universe of Linux, there's so many distros out there. You're going to have a different type of service manager, and yeah. So how I talked about systemctl, you got a couple of, this is just a basic example, right? So you use systemctl to control services. So you have these command systemctl, the verb, right? So you got start, stop, enable, disable status, and service. This is very helpful when you want to, okay, so status is super helpful to kind of debug your services. So usually you'll get your activity, your status of your service, and then you'll see some recent logs of the service right below systemctl status. So this is very good when you want to troubleshoot your services. Say, for example, you edited your SSH config, and when you do systemctl restart SSHD, and it breaks. The best way to figure it out is just by going to systemctl status and figure out, oh, I forgot to add a caret right here, or parentheses or equals sign. So yeah, it's very helpful. Also, if you want to know what type of services are on your box, use systemctl tag, tag type equals service. Very, very helpful. Okay. Okay, so in Windows, it's very similar to Linux in that it's still a backgrounded task, but Windows uses something else. So Windows uses the services.exe or the service control manager to kind of group all the systems together, just like systemd. And it also has to adhere to certain policies of the service control manager. It has to have certain things to certain attributes to it, and make sure it's permissioned correctly for it to follow the SCM guidelines, which we will talk about later, probably next semester. So a few ways you can interact with services. So you got the GUI, services.msc. It's a Windows snap-on for the Windows Management Console. This is the main way that a lot of people interact with their services. So you can look at the properties of the service. You can stop, start, pause, and restart your services from the MSC. They're interchangeable, okay? So, but if you do not want to use the GUI, you can also use SC, which is service config, I believe, service config. So you got a few options. So SC and then the options. So you got query. You can query the service. So you can see just quick details about it. You can do start stop just like systemctl, and you can do SCQC, which stands for quick config. So you can check much more details than what query will give. Query will usually give just the status, but QC is going to give you a lot more details, maybe the dependencies it needs for Windows, as well as the location of the binary, so the executable such as DNS or LDAP, things like that. Okay. All right, so a little bit more. So yeah, service MSC, a lot easier to work with. This is how you guys are going to fix your services. You do not want to use the registry because honestly, looking through the registry is very tough since you have multiple places to look at. So you have, of course, did I mention it in the previous slide? Oh, where'd it go? Oh, that'll be a couple slides later, but I'll get to that. You can also interact with your services through PowerShell. So we got a lot of these. Okay. Oh, really? Oh, yeah. Maybe I should just clip it. Is that better? Okay. Yeah.
Hello?
Good. Okay. So you can interact with PowerShell. So you got get service. Get information about the service. You got a couple more options, of course. Restart, set, start and stop, of course. You also have different ways you can do besides PowerShell. So back in the CMD days, we used net. So net command's very helpful. You got net user, to look at users, but you can also do services. So when you use the net start command, you can also specify the name of the service to get more information about it. You can also do it through WMI, which is Windows Management Instruction. It's a little more advanced. Don't really need it. It follows like a MySQL type language for syntax. We'll probably cover this later, but it's good to know if you guys are interested. I highly suggest looking up at WMI. It's pretty cool stuff. Okay, so what if you want to look at Linux config files for your services? So because you picked Linux, you want to have control of your system, right? Right. Okay, so where you want to look? So you want to look at /etc. So /etc. The naming convention was created because it's etc. Right? It contains everything else that the system does not depend on necessarily. Okay, so a lot of services are contained. A lot of config files are contained in here. So it'll usually be .conf in the directory or .d. This is not big enough. Okay. Oh, okay. So a couple of examples we got here. So we got Etsy Engine X, Etsy SSHD, Etsy scoring. I don't think we used this tool during IRSec. If you did see it, then yeah, that was probably Red Team. Also want to quickly mention that especially for web stuff, you will also have a couple of configs in what's known as var www. So that's where your index.html is stored. Maybe a couple of other files related to your Apache server, Nginx server, right? So make sure that you know both of them as well. It's pretty important for the blue team competitions. So I know that one of the teams didn't back up their SSHD config files, and they got the red team just completely deleted their SSH config files in the Etsy directory. So they basically couldn't run SSH anymore. So it's very important that you guys look into these config files and make sure you have a backup of them stored in your operating system somewhere. It's very important to keep backups. Okay, so for Windows, so through MSC, the Windows Management Console, you can right-click through properties and you can find the location of the service executable. You might also find some DLLs in the location, so that's also very helpful in case, say for example, in your registry key for your DNS, where they changed the path to the executable. It's very helpful to know where that is and make sure that check it because that's one of the breaks that Red Team uses to break your service. Okay, so here we go. So we got registry, right? So we got HKLM system, current control set services. Okay, so this is the registry key or registry set that contains your services registry keys. Okay, it's very it contains a lot of configuration options for your services. So, for example, RDP is enabled through these registry keys sometimes, and it can also mess with your connections and how many connections are allotted. You can also change it through group policy, but group policy is not a guarantee. Okay. And as I mentioned earlier, each service has different service accounts. So before Windows XP, all the services will run locally on the same user in session 0, running as system, which is not good. Okay? Because that means that each service had access to the entire operating system, right? Because system is the highest privileged account. So post XP, Windows added these two accounts which are lower privileged. So we got local service and network service. Local service doesn't require any networking; it's just very basic. It just only needs to depend on the system, and the network is going outside, right? It needs internet connection to function as a service, and system, of course, and certain services need to be run as an administrator or be in an elevated state to run. So designed to have it run as system all the time. Yes. Okay, now we're going to go into all the other core services and then how to manage your services. So here we go. Let's get started. Okay, so DNS. DNS is very crucial. Okay, so what DNS does is it's going to translate your IP addresses into human readable text. Okay, so it's very hard to memorize. Say, for example, 172.16.255, 251, 76, something like that. Some random arbitrary IP address. So what they created was DNS, right, to translate those IP address into into text, so which is easier to understand and a lot easier to remember than numbers. So how DNS runs, it's going to be running on port 53 with UDP and TCP as well. So make sure if you're creating views to allow both. Remember for some of my competitions, for the AD box specifically, or sorry, the DC box on our LAN network, it only allowed UDP. So that was a very bad idea because the DNS check wasn't going through correctly. So there's a hierarchy of servers that resolves names into IP addresses, like I said before. So translating arbitrary IP addresses to understandable names. So maybe this is like grandmascookies.com. Oh no, it's easier to remember than this whole. So how does DNS kind of how does DNS look for these like mappings of IP addresses to domain names? Okay, so it's recursive servers that will do all the work for you. It's going to ask a question and get the final answer. It'll also iterate through the DNS records and tell you if what to look for next. So this is also dependent on the record. So there's different record types for each domain name. domain. So this is kind of declaring that, okay, this is the DNS server that I want to listen to. This is the DNS server that we need to look for. And we got aliases, which is going to be the direct mapping. So A is going to be IPv4, and 4A is going to be IPv6. We also have mail records to designate mail servers as well. Pointing names to names, maybe some domains point to a very similar name, but they both use for the same thing. Yep. Yes, we want to scream very loud for all the 64 bits of IP addresses. Yes, thanks, Vila. So yes, and there's several more. Look it up. Yeah, it gets very deep. It gets very deep. So why this is important is because Active Directory heavily relies on DNS because it's a whole domain system. Domains, so Active Directory uses domains to kind of categorize and separate different groups of objects, right? Uh, so you have the domain force, which is going to be last two parts. So think of back to IRC. So you had T, T whatever, right? And you had Olympus.json. So GC is going to be GC is going to be top level domain, and then Olympus is going to be like it out right here. That's domain name, right? So they have separate domains for each team. So you got team whatever, 0, 16, right? And that's how DNS is applied. So Active Directory is applied. So it's very important. It's very useful. Right? Post is SSH. So SSH is used to a variety of boxes, even for us. So SSH can be installed. You gotta know this like the back of your hand. SSH is so good. It's pretty sure it's default installed on all Linux boxes, and you just gotta know this. You just really gotta know this. So items that we'll cover in the SSH config. Please, please, it's so easy for us to just root access to this. Used. It's basically getting a from SSH. It's funny because this actually service and enforced SSH. You can get reading key SSH. Yep. I think that was key files. So it's gonna look through the .ssh config and look for known hosts to see which execution you need to connect. So SSH, for example, some, let's say, one user throws in their key into do you guys think that they'll be able to solve this? Let me realize this. Some user throws a random key to a known host. If it's not enabled, yes, yes, because it is an authorized key. Okay, so that's important. So you have multi authentication. Okay, so this is if you have a key that's you don't recognize, maybe you want to check that out. So public key authentication for keys that or not? Good. Next, we're going to go into this. That's good. Well, that's good. Better. Okay. Okay, so next we're going to talk about dynamic host configuration protocol, also known as DHCP. So DHCP dynamically assigns IP addresses to hosts. So if you're configuring, say, for routing and switching lab or a system in lab, you're usually doing static IP configuration where the IP address is not changing, the default gateway is automatically set. Its DNS servers are automatically set as well. What DHCP does is the service is running either on the router or the host, and it'll dynamically assign IP addresses to hosts based on a scope that you give it. So it could be a certain range within your subnet, or certain IP addresses go to this known host, and it's statically assigned that it's actually reading from the DHCP server and grabbing that IP address for whatever lease time there is. So DHCP already, it also has this it's not an option, but it wants DHCP is meant to not waste IP addresses. So, say for example, there's a really old computer that's a statically assigned IP address, right? It's been sitting on the network forever, but you're trying to get more computers into your main office. What you want is to not waste that IP address on a computer that's just sitting there idly and wasting, just sitting on your land. It's just doing nothing. So what DHCP can do is detect that that's that's just been idle. You can configure that. Okay, yeah, this computer, this host that's been sitting idle for a very long time. We don't want to assign an IP address to that anymore, and put an exclusion for that specific host. And so there's a very famous process that we call DORA that describes the um, DHCP protocol. Okay, so first, the client that has the DHCP client service on their box will look for a DHCP server, and it's like, hey, I need an IP address. This is discovery. It's trying to find a DHCP server. Next, you'll issue out an offer. The server, which will receive the discover request, will send out an offer based on the prior scope configuration that's set on the DHCP server. Then the client will request or reject that IP address. And that's going to be the R step. And then it'll acknowledge, the server will acknowledge that, hey, this host has the IP address. For DHCP, you don't necessarily see it a lot of times in competitions because we use statically assigned addresses to make sure that services are running. Right? If an IP address randomly changes, how are we going to know where to find that host? We're not going to know. So that's why a lot of competitions don't have DHCP. I think my freshman year I did see it once at UB lockdown. We had DHCP once. Okay. So net services is a class that really spends time on this, like DNS as well. DNS and DHCP has been over half the semester on doing a lot of DHCPs. All right, next up, FTP. Okay, so FTP stands for File Transfer Protocol. Yep. So FTP runs on port 21 and 20. Oh, which reminds me, I didn't cover DHCP. So the DHCP ports run on 67 and 68. 67 is used for the server, and 68 is used for the client. FTP, so FTP is going to be file transfer protocol, as I said before. 21 is going to be the command port, where it initializes a request and accepts and creates the channel. And then it uses port 20 to transfer all the data between the two hosts. Okay. By itself, it's not really secure, so if you open up a Wireshark capture, you can actually look at the FTP data. It's being transferred in plain text, so if somebody downloads a file from FTP, you can actually see a lot of it, as long as it's not encrypted in any way. The file is not encrypted. So since FTP is not encrypted and people saw the weakness in that, and people can sniff traffic and all of that, FTP was created. So it's a combination of SSH and FTP. So it's using the SSH authentication to make sure that all parties that need to connect to the FTP server can, and those that don't need to, don't. It also shares the encryption that SSH has with, I believe it's AES-128, I think. And for blue teamers, some common FTP misconfigurations, so anonymous login is enabled. Yeah, we probably should have had this presentation earlier to let blue teamers know that there's a lot of stuff that that's vulnerable in FTP. So what you can do is when you're logging into an FTP server, you can actually pass it the username anonymous with an empty password, and you basically can get in if this option is turned on. You can also own on upload. So it changes the owner when it's uploaded. So you can actually do, I've done this in the CTF challenges where there's a FTP server that you have open access to, and you upload a server and you can execute it as another user, which can give you, say for example, like a reverse shell through FTP. You can also chmod on upload, again, like I explained. So what you could do is you upload this executable with the sticky bit turned on. Sticky bit will run the binary as sudo, and you can get a root reverse shell from FTP by using these kinds of misconfigurations. Okay, so mail. I know that we had mail in IRSX, so this is a little, might be fun for some people, might not be a good memory for some others. So SMTP stands for Simple Mail Transfer Protocol, and it's going to be running on port 25, and it's used for sending emails. So it's going to be your mail transfer agent, I believe. So SMTP is using the mail transfer protocol. So sorry, the mail transfer agent is going to be using SMTP to be sending those emails. POP3 running on 110. Port 110 is used for receiving from one client. So this is going to be your mail user agent, which receives the emails to your box. IMAP as well. This is another mail user agent that's going to, but it has the option for receiving from multiple clients. So this is a little advanced since we didn't have a full mailbox set up during IRSec. But if we did, we'd probably be sending you emails, and you guys would have to, that would probably been a check, and you guys would have to make sure that you guys were able to receive emails from White Team. But that didn't work too much, so we just went with having the SMTP service up. Some common services, that's a typo on me, my bad. Postfix and Dovecot. So that's going to be the service that's going to be running on your Linux box. So Postfix for SMTP and Dovecot for, I believe it's IMAP. And Microsoft Exchange, gotta love it, for Windows. Don't do it. There's also an alternative for the think it was a mail user agent, HMail. We use it sometimes. I haven't really seen it too much besides CCDC minicomp, I believe, freshman year or sophomore year. Yeah, they're very similar to something like Outlook or Thunderbird. Okay, so we're gonna go into different remoting protocols, right? So we got VNC running on port 5900, X11 on 5900, VNC on 6000, and RDP running on 3389. So remotely manage another computer using a desktop environment. So these services are gonna be able to have a GUI through them. So you're gonna have GUI instead of just the command line interface. So VNC can be used without authentication, which is not too good. We got RDP, which has weak logins that are acceptable to a brute force, and that's the command for both of them. And for X11, as I said before, when on the SSH slide, is where you can get GUI access through SSH, and you just throw this tag X option as long as it's enabled in your configs. So these are different services that allow you GUI access. VNC and X11 you don't see in competitions at all, pretty much. We do, however, use VNC for the stack and a little bit of the black team stuff. We've used VNC before. RDP is really important for you guys. I saw a lot of RDP sessions open, and you guys were going into the cloud for blue teamers, so I was very happy to see that. My freshman year, I did not know how to use RDP or anything. I couldn't even get to my cloud boxes, so I'm very glad that you guys are ahead of the game. And yeah. We're gonna go over WinRM2. So think of WinRM as kind of SSH for Windows, but not really. It's a little different. So instead of creating an encrypted channel, WinRM still creates an encrypted channel, of course, but it's using XML. It's a little weird. It's a little weird and funky like that. So it's going to be running on port 5985 for regular HTTP and 5986 for HTTPS. So there's two modes to WinRM sessions. So you can configure WinRM to use HTTP or HTTPS. The HTTPS version will require you to set up a little more things through the configuration. So through reg keys and group policy, you would need to set up different authentication methods because it doesn't like to have the default authentication, so basic authentication through just passwords. It doesn't like that for HTTPS. I've tried multiple times to set it up during competition, but I was never successful. But if you guys can, let me know, because having a better encrypted channel through a WinRM is a lot better than just having regular HTTP. So yeah, it needs to be manually turned on and configured, so it doesn't come turned on by default, just like RDP. You need to start the service, and you need to set up the listener using this command. I'm pretty sure not a lot of people needed to worry about this during the start of the competition for WinRM because it was all up, hopefully. If it ever broke, you just do a fast setup, WinRM quick config, or using the shortcut WinRM QC. So I know a lot of people were struggling with that during Blue Team. Make sure you use Google. Google's your best friend for a lot of these. I know that WinRM doesn't have particularly good documentation for these type of stuff, so it is a little hard, but just keep on pushing through it, and you should be good to go. So this is how you can get into a WinRM session through a computer that both has WinRM enabled and configured for the proper authentication. So you can't just go from a host that's using port 5985 to 5986 because those are two different protocols and, frankly, two different ports that they're using. You can configure the ports to be on separate. You can configure the WinRM session to be listening and working through on different ports through the config. I won't describe that here, but what you need to know is how to enter session through WinRM Just enter PS session with the computer name and the credentials. What I usually do is just do enter PS session computer name, the computer name maybe on the cloud, so what's it called? Delos, I think it was. Delos for the IIS server. Credentials, I put a star, since I don't know which, usually when I put the username right here, it doesn't work sometimes. And I just put a star to kind of quickly bring up the prompt that asks you for the credentials. And I just change the star and remove it right away. I find it a lot easier doing that than just entering the credentials through command line. Maybe also secure too, because they might look at your command line history and say, oh, free credentials, nice. You can also get all the current WinRM sessions going by doing get PS session. I'm pretty sure that's, oh yeah, event log. You can also look at WinRM sessions through the event log and where it's established. It'll give you a lot more details through there. But also just remember that you can also, there's a whole WinRM PowerShell module. I believe it's a separate module. It might just be included in the default, but they have good documentation for the PowerShell modules to interact through WinRM, but not the configuration for some reason. Okay, so now we're going to talk about databases. I know that we didn't have it in IRSec, but this is pretty common. You can see multiple databases throughout different types of competitions. So two of the most popular are going to be MySQL, MongoDB, and SQLite. So that's going to be respectively on 3306, 27,017. It's a very big number, but I guess it works. And SQLite. So I kind of want to talk about SQLite for a second. SQLite is an internal service. It doesn't necessarily run through the network. So usually, like I know that for iOS, the iOS file system uses it to kind of store all their their files and event data. So what you need to know about working with databases, so it's all usually in SQL language. So it's always in some type of format like this. So if you want to know what databases are on your database service, so you show databases, then you want to use the database, so you supply the database name that you get from show databases. Then from there, you have show tables. So each database will have its own tables. There'd be a row and a column for each data value. All right, this is entity and attribute. You'll learn all this in 230, ISD 230. Okay, and then if you want to see the data from the table name, you can do select star from the table name. Sometimes you can do select star from star, but it doesn't work. You want to make sure to supply the table name. If you want to see the attributes of the database, make sure you do describe and the table name. That way you can know what attributes there are inside each table. So for some misconfigurations with databases, you got not sanitizing input, so this can lead to SQL injection, probably the most famous of the database vulnerabilities. We will talk about more of this in Web Week regarding SQLi injection, cross-site scripting, things like that. Weak default / no passwords. This is also a common thing. I remember in my freshman year in UB lockdown, we had a MariaDB service on our cloud, and it was a weird theming where we had to have a blockchain thing on our MariaDB. It was very strange to say the least. But I remember our whole table went down because I forgot to change default creds for the service. So always remember that sometimes there might be specific passwords for services, so that's going to be very important to change. Okay, it's not just the domain admins, domain users, local admins, local users. There's also service accounts that you need to change the default creds for. It's very, very important. Okay, so next up, I'm going to talk about web just briefly. We're going to do a heavy deep dive onto this later in the semester, on Web Week. I believe it's week 10. Also, we also have RIT offers a whole class in web, which is going to be CSEC 380, Principles in Web Application Exploitation, I believe that's the name. So, of course, I'm pretty sure everybody knows. It's HTTP runs on port 80, HTTPS on 443. Some common misconfigurations, again, for web is going to be unsanitized inputs. So what I talked about is cross-site scripting, shortened it to XSS, and SQLi for SQL injection. So this is where in certain input fields in a website or a web page, you can actually send in SQL commands to access the database behind I guess you call it the backend database in through the website, because they haven't properly sanitized inputs for querying the database and retrieving that data. Permissioning files, so there's HT files that are not too good. Actually, I don't know too much about this one. But file uploads, so web shells, if using a web server is running at root, you win. So this was covered during the red team debrief during RSEC, where one of the red teamers, I believe, uploaded I forgot what it was. Oh yeah, they turned on the debugger mode for Flask, which allowed any user to basically run root shell commands through the debugger. Yeah, Flask was running as root. So proper permissioning for services is also very important. We've also got IIS. Kind of was a little forgotten about until we ransomwared all your guys' Delos boxes. It's pretty fun as a red teamer. But IIS is going to be the web server for Windows. You install it through Server Manager as an additional role for it. You also have Apache and Nginx for Linux. There's also a couple different other web services. So you got, for example, Tomcat and, I can't really think of any, but Tomcat I have a very interesting story about. So again, I'm very forgetful, and I forgot to change default creds yet again, and I had just barely got access to the Tomcat box on the LAN because the red teamer domain joined. Oh, no, this is different. There was a Tomcat box on our LAN which I couldn't get access to because I probably just simply forgot about it. And I finally got around to it for an inject, and I got ransomware. So again, default creds, very important. You'll learn your lesson. Hopefully you guys you'll learn your lesson after IRSEC, but default creds, super important. Don't forget, services also have default creds. Very important. We're going to go talk about SMB. So SMB stands for Server Message Block. There's also Samba, which is I think it's also cross-platform as well, but SMB is for mainly Windows. So for Windows side, SMB is going to be using those 3 ports as well as 445. NetBIOS, won't talk too much about it here, but it's something in Windows. It's for Linux, network shares for Linux and Windows, I'm sorry. Samba and NFS, so network file share, by default do not require authentication, so it can just be accessed by anyone if the configuration is not set. SMB shares require authentication, but can be disabled. So this is MS 17.01.010. Does anybody know what that exploit is? No? Maybe Eternal Blue? Eternal Blue. So MS 17.010 is going to be Eternal Blue. Open network shares can be used for data exfiltration as well. So I believe there's an inject during IRSEC for
properly configuring your SMB. So again, SMB share on the cloud box, which I believe was Troy. So you can do that through PowerShell by doing get SMB server config. And these are the different ways that remote shares and file shares are mounted onto the system. So you got Samba using mount, SMB, this is how you can access, this is how you can access all of the different types of file sharing services. So Samba, SMB, and NFS, network file sharing. And Telnet. Oh, we don't talk about this one. If you're using Telnet, you're doing something wrong. Okay? So Telnet running on port 23. Oh, no. You guys want to skip the slide? So there's absolutely no encryption. All username and passwords are sent in clear text. You can see all of it. You just open Wireshark and use Telnet. You can see everything. Good for two things. So Telnet towel blinking lights.nl. It's this it's the entirety of the Star Wars movie inside of Telnet. So you guys can go try that out on your own. We're not responsible for anything. RIT6 is not responsible if your system gets trashed. You can also send email. It's very interesting stuff, but it is highly insecure and frankly not used. OK, so just detecting your services prior to all the stuff that I talked about getting your services through the service manager, system CTL. You can also maybe, if you're provided a Kali box, you can do Nmap to check what services are open and which ports are open. I think everybody knows Nmap, the port scanning tool. Also, make sure, as I specified before, using Google, and also this, the image didn't load, I guess. But Google is your best friend when you're trying to look up services and more information about it. It's very, very, very important that you do that. And once you've kind of learned a lot of the blue team aspects of it, of how to secure your service, your core service, you can kind of turn that blue team mindset into the red team mindset. And it's very, very, very cool stuff once you do that. And that's it. Any questions?